Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, absurdism in the extreme. It's all available here in the Tales from the Omni Vault book series. Check the description for Amazon links so you can get your copies and start reading today. Thank you all, and now, on to the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and I'm here to share my thoughts on the first episode of Ultraman Arc. I know that quite a few of you got introduced to the Ultra franchise through Netflix's recent film Ultraman Rising, which I was skeptical about at first, but it did eventually win me over. I do think it is a good movie. Maybe not the place I would recommend starting, but a good movie. But if you're looking for something new, something to further your journey into Ultraman, or maybe something specifically for your kids to watch because they might be into Ultraman, where do you go from here? Well, there's plenty of Ultraman to go around these days, but the newest one, Ultraman Arc, has just dropped its first episode on YouTube. Yes, in both Japanese and English. So first of all, I was a big fan of Ultraman Blazar, which was the last new series, like completely new original series that the Ultra series did. I reviewed almost every episode up to a certain point. I had to take a break because it was eating up too much of my time doing those videos and I had to get other projects done. Did a very long video for the end that pretty much summarized my thoughts on the whole thing. Basically, I'm a Blazar fan. Blazar felt like it was a return to form for the Ultra series. After multiple shows that had gotten way too kid-centric, and I mean that as like they were pandering to children, trying to sell toys, not really focused on being for everyone like the Ultra series originally was. Yes, Ultra was always made with a younger audience in mind, but that didn't mean it was exclusively for kids. They kind of took the philosophy of C.S. Lewis to heart, that a children's story that can only be enjoyed by children isn't much of a story. So Ultraman has always had that wider appeal. But Blazar took that to heart as well. It wasn't concerned about selling toys. It wasn't about pandering to children. Kids could still watch it, sure, but it was the kind of Ultraman show that felt like it could have fit in right alongside the original set. When I saw the trailer for Ultraman Arc, I was initially a little bit skeptical, much like with Ultraman Rising. I looked at it and I thought, okay, the colors are much brighter. They're talking about stuff like use your imagination, and the transformation device works like some sort of simplified Rubik's Cube. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's back to business as usual now. But gotta give it its day in court, right? So I watched the first episode, not knowing if my expectations were going to be met, or if they were going to fall short, or if they were going to be surpassed. I am pleased to report that Ultraman Arc is off to a really, really good start. It's not necessarily the best first episode of the Ultra series, but considering what I thought it was going to be, and what other shows prior to it have been like, I think Ultraman Arc does have the potential to really stand out as another good series. So let me get my few little critiques out of the way first. As far as it being more for kids, I do think I was on the right track in that assessment. It's definitely skewing more towards being for a younger audience than being for the widest possible audience. It's certainly nowhere near being for an older audience like Nexus or Ultra 7X. It's not quite to the same level as the Ultra Kids anime or Ultraman Cosmos, but it's definitely headed in that direction. You can tell this because the intro and outro music are definitely brighter and poppier than the rock tunes of Blazar. The color scheme overall is also a lot lighter, a lot more in the pastel region, I guess you could say, with some things. And as for the performances, they are good performances. I want to state that right up front. But you ever see what happens in more recent Japanese comedies where, especially if they're aimed at a younger audience, the actors start really hemming it up, being very loud, mugging at the camera, exaggerating their movements, no matter what they were acting like before? That's how the comedy plays in this one. And I'm not saying that's bad, because, you know, that's the cultural style over in Japan. But, you know, certain cultural things don't always cross borders. I don't know how that's being received over in Japan itself. Here in the West, you might think it's a little bit cringy. Luckily, there's not too many of those scenes. There are like a few. But for the most part, it's not trying to be like, in your face, aren't we being silly kind of comedy. But of course, that also means the writing is going to be a little bit simpler. There's the plot here is very, very straightforward. It does set up a couple of mysteries, like how kaiju just suddenly appeared some 16 years ago. We don't know where this version of Ultraman comes from yet. There's this giant, they call it a horn, that's just sticking up out of the ground in the countryside. That is clearly significant, but there are still mysteries surrounding that. So they are putting in place some puzzle pieces to be put in place later, but as far as the actual plot of the episode, very straightforward. No real complexities. You get to know a general idea of who the five primary characters are, or is it 6? Because the robot that they have as part of the team can technically separate into 2 personalities when the head comes off and starts floating around and the body gains its own autonomy. We can figure that out another day. So you get to know the basics, but you're not really getting an intricate story. And then, of course, there's the way that we get the name Ultraman Arc. Apparently, when this Ultraman flies away, he leaves behind this arc in the sky. Not quite a rainbow, although it is multicolored, but it's like charged with electricity or something. And they're just like, at the end, apparently no one had actually named this thing yet. Not even our main character knew the giant's name, apparently. Or if he did, he just didn't know this one. And basically they say, we'll call him Ultraman Arc, because Ultraman is a better name than Mysterious Giant, and look at that glorious arc. The cheese just drips right off of it, but those are the terms that the show has set forward, so I can't really be mad at it for that. But that's really all I can say in terms of negative. Let's get to the good stuff. So like I said, the plot is very straightforward. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I did count it as the critiques because, you know, it's not the most complex thing ever. But for being the first episode, maybe it's not the worst way to get people into it. It's, again, kind of assuming that you have some idea of what's going on with the whole Ultra series mythology, even though this is its own continuity, but not necessarily as much as something like Rising did, at least as far as I can tell. So you have your Easter eggs, like there are some brief appearances by Gamora and Red King in some footage playing of past encounters. And, you know, you recognize them if you're a longtime fan. If you're just tuning in, these are more monsters. Whether they'll show up later, who knows. But the straightforwardness of the plot also helps us get a basic understanding of what's going on. We have a general idea of how the characters interact. We know what the new team Skip is supposed to do in times of crisis. We know that Yuma, our main character, is already an Ultraman. And, you know, it's not something that you have to think too hard about in order to understand, which is fine. In terms of design for our new Ultra hero and the monster he faces, Ultraman Arc himself feels kind of like he's, again, getting back to the older Ultra designs. It's not like the super armored up versions like Ultraman Zero or Ultraman Z, I think. And it's not the asymmetrical type like Blazar had. It's not overly simple either, but, you know, if you were to look at his silhouette head on, you might think, oh, he's some sort of redesign of Tiga or Gaia, perhaps. It's when you look at him from the side that you see his most unique feature, which is that swept-back crest forming a partial arc. Very deliberate, I'm sure. Weirdly enough, that feature reminds me of the Guyver, which is a weird thing to say because clearly Ultraman Arc is, like I keep saying, aimed at a younger audience, and the Guyver is an ultra-violent, darkened, edgy horror manga. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's a deliberate reference, I don't know. It's not a bad design for Ultraman Arc, though, so he looks good. He's recognizable as the hero. The monster here, well, technically there are two. There's this weird alien parasite that I'm sure is going to be a recurring problem, and it gets itself inside a creature called Shagong, which is something you can tell is kind of based on a turtle, but because it's a Super Raya production, they obviously took that idea and made it into something completely unexpected. It's not a turtle the way you see a normal turtle. It's not even a turtle the way Gamera is a turtle. It's something just out there and weird, clearly its own thing. And apparently they're a species, so maybe we'll be seeing more of them in the future. It makes for a good opponent with some interesting attack moves, and yeah, puts up a good fight. Speaking of the fight, it's the battle, the visual side, where Ultraman Arc really steps up the game. The very first thing we see are POV shots of people on the ground as these monsters are attacking. And the special effects, of course, are integrated very well. It gives you that sense of scale of how big these things are. Some really harrowing shots like somebody looking up and then they see the part of a building starting to come down. Arc reaches out and catches it. And that is a solid way to start things. From there, like, the visuals are what you would expect, and then we get to the fight at the end. And there are many surprises to be found here. First of all, it's done in real time. They do this little thing of having this transition where one of the characters whips out a phone and starts filming it, and it's not shot from that the whole time, but it does put a little bit of a timer up in the corner. And that timer is counting down how long the fight is going. Now, this is significant because your average Ultra series states that any given Ultraman can only exist in that form for roughly 3 minutes, give or take. And the running gag among the fandom is Ultraman only lasts 3 minutes as long as you're not actually counting. The shows tend to play fast and loose with how long 3 minutes actually is. And nobody really is a stickler about it. We just suspend our disbelief and we're like, okay, so 3 minutes in the show clearly isn't 3 minutes in real life, whatever. But interestingly, they actually decided this time around to have it be in real time and show that, yeah, the fight really did take that long. It's a little over 3 minutes. I did say it's roughly that amount of time. But that actually gives you an idea of just how long a 3-minute battle can actually be, and how densely packed, too. Now, I've spoken to other people who have been watching Ultraman and have seen other series that I haven't yet. Even they haven't seen something like that done before, so that's pretty impressive. Also impressive is the fact that the fight is filmed like it was all done in one take. It's not. If you know what to look for, you can tell which camera tricks they use to splice scenes together and make it just look like it's all one take. But those are done really well. So, like, even if you can spot them, I'm thinking you'll be in a state where you're just not actively caring about it. Maybe if you go back and you really want to analyze it, you'll see it. But for the most part, the illusion works. You can just follow the fight as it progresses through the whole thing, and it feels like it was all done in one shot, and that enhances the whole idea that it's happening in real time. Again, I don't think that's ever really been done in one of these shows before. I don't even think it was done in one of the movies, come to think of it. And then, of course, you have some of the most impressive cinematography I've seen out of the Ultra series. Again, you have those POV things at the beginning. During the fight itself, you've got stuff like this one shot of Ultraman gets knocked down, and as he's getting back up, the camera is inside a building, and you can see him through the building, and you can see real people in the building. And as he's getting up, the camera's going through each floor as he rises and gets back on his feet, and it is seamless. You would actually think that they found some way to put a camera on a drone, have it x-ray through the first wall of the building, and just followed him up as a real life-sized Ultraman was getting back up onto his feet. There's some really impressive stuff in there. The visuals are definitely where this show is at its strongest, and of course, it's tokusatsu. You expect a certain level of quality. Well, maybe some of you expect that quality to be low because your only exposure to it is the really low-budget, campy, cheesy stuff. And, you know, that has its charm, but when tokusatsu, especially with the practical stuff, when it's good, it's really good. And this is a prime example of how good it can be. So the long and the short of it is that Ultraman Arc is, again, skewing a bit more towards being for kids than it is for a general audience. But the quality is so good, and I'm all for kids having good quality in their entertainment. I have never liked the excuse people throw around when some kid's show or kid's book or something is terrible and they just say, well, it's made for kids. Kids don't understand quality. Bull. Kids do know what quality is, even if they can't necessarily articulate it. And they deserve to have quality the same way adults do. Besides, those kids are going to grow up one day as well. And if any of them go on to make their own pieces of media, they're going to be looking back at the stuff they liked, and it's only the high quality stuff that they're going to take inspiration from. The rest they're going to ditch. So Ultraman Arc, I think, does have that level of quality. Could it still skew in the direction of being a toy commercial? Maybe. But the first episode, at least, has avoided that. It's not that there aren't those toyetic elements. Arc already has a sword that he uses to finish the battle. He's going to have 2 alternate modes. Who knows what else is going to happen further down the line. And of course, there's that robot, or robots, whatever. But all the same, there's still a level of quality here, and it's good quality. I cannot stress that enough. Very good quality. There's stuff here I've never seen the Ultra series do in any capacity. So, yeah, I would recommend this first episode, at the very least. We will see what happens. I hope it maintains this level of quality going forward. For now, though, it's off to a strong start. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.